All right, good morning, my Schmieda family, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. How you doing? That's good. So today, Dahlia Dippolito's in the hot seat. We're starting at the beginning of her interrogation. If you missed yesterday's episode, it's all or most of the backstory that I could come up with. So, just a very quick update. She marries this guy, Mike Dippolito, 5 days after he was divorced to his wife. She was a prostitute. Mike signed over his house to her because he thought he was being sued for this stock fraud thing that he got in trouble for. But anyway, 6 months into their marriage, Dahlia wants Mike gone. She wants the house to herself, and she wants Mike out of there. So at first, she tried to frame him with drugs. She tried to put drugs in his car because he was on probation, and then would call the cops being like, this guy's dealing drugs, hoping the cops would pull him over, find the drugs. That would violate his probation, and then they would throw him in jail, and then Dahlia could just live in the house. Well, that didn't work. The cops didn't find the drugs when they pulled him over. And so then Dahlia's next plan was to have a hitman kill him. She hired a hitman. It was a cop. They staged this huge, fake murder scene, told Dahlia to come home from the gym. Her husband's been murdered. They had the whole cameras and caution tape out there. Dahlia comes home. They say, sorry, Dahlia, your husband's killed. She goes, and then they take her down to the police station. They plop her in an interrogation room, and this is where we start today. So she thinks she's down there to just, answer questions like, who would do this? Do you know anyone that would do this? And so she doesn't even really know she's in an interrogation. And so, who's she playing for this interrogation? She has to pretend to be hysterical because her dear husband was just murdered. And so she needs to keep up the hysterical. She needs to be helpful. She just needs to, answer the questions. I'm sure she planned mentally for this. And she's feeling pretty good, I think. She thinks her plan worked. She thinks that Mike is gone. And she just got to get through this little chunk of talking with the police, and then she'll be done, right? Well, no. In about 13 minutes into this, the cops lay down the law, probably harder than she's ever experienced in her life. People like Dahlia can make it a really long time in life with just no one really calling them out on their bullshit. Dahlia has the ability to dip into the Dahlia wormhole of absurdity. And, just like Stiven or Jody, they kind of all have their own version of it. But just like them, she has the ability to just sort of go into la la land with her stories. And 13 minutes into this interrogation, her la la land runs into a brick wall, and this detective just lays it down. So let's get into this. So she has to be hysterical, right? You would be if your spouse was just murdered. Problem is if you're acting hysterical, she's putting on this show, it's really hard to act and keep up that energy if you're not getting the correct energy back from her acting partner, which is the cop. And so the cop is sort of, pretend, hey, sorry for your loss, but she's having a hard time keeping up this hysterical. It kind of comes and goes. So she's hysterical, like, I gotta cry. But after, and then the cop's kind of just sitting there, writing stuff. So then she kind of just runs out of gas. Just kind of sits there right? And the cops, at first, are pretending 80% to just, she is the innocent wife of a murdered husband. You know, they want to get the huge reaction from this is real, you know, you lost your husband, to this isn't, you know, this is nothing. Dahlia, you know, he's alive. And then to show that whole switch where she's like, to her just being like, oh fuck, is what they want. Because it, you know, and then hopefully once they make that switch and they lay down the law, then they're hoping that she'll just be like, confess, you know, and then they don't have, it just, you know, obviously they just want a confession. So they're hoping to have this big contrast of the, and then when they lay down the law, to hopefully have nowhere for her to go, nowhere for her to lie, hopefully to seal up the wormhole of absurdity and just have her nowhere for her to go except to just confess. So I think that's the whole goal. There's a few comments of like, why even go through this huge production with her? And I think one, because Cops is in town. And when Showbiz is in town, you're going big. And two, to just show if this does go to trial, which they're hoping they can just get a quick confession if it doesn't. If it does go to trial, to say, look at her. Look at how just full of shit she is. She's sitting there lying like a murderer, rambling on. And then when we lay down the law, it just, you know, everything dries up. So she's a psycho and therefore should go to jail. I think that's what they're trying to do with the whole production. All right, let's get into this. So at this point, like I said, the cops are playing the game a little bit. And so they're saying, okay, it's just protocol. We got to read you your rights. You know, and Dahlia's doing the lie cry. So he's like, yeah, it's just protocol. So she's sitting there thinking that she's about ready to just answer questions, you know, and she's not being looked at. And then all of a sudden, the cop's like, all right, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used. And you can tell Dahlia's sitting there like, what the hell? What do you mean anything I say can? That's a little weird. And she kind of cuts him off, and she's just like, I just want to see my husband. And the detective is like, you don't want to see him, believe me. And then there's kind of like a pause, and then he just keeps going. You have the right to remain silent. Just keeps the rights going. And I love watching Dahlia through this whole thing, because she's thinking, what the hell? I thought that... And then, like I said earlier, it's just hard for her because she has to be hysterical. That is the key to this whole lie, is she needs to act like her spouse was just murdered out of the blue. But all of a sudden, you got the detective being like, all right, this whole thing's being videotaped. Sign here. This allows us to videotape. And she's like, well, I don't want to be videotaped. And the detective just goes, well, you're being videotaped. And she's just like, all right. And then he goes, all right, so then they get through the rights thing, which made her feel weird, because it's like, why am I being... And then once they get through that, the cop kind of goes back to all right, who do you know, or is there anybody that you can think of that will want to kill your husband? And this is what Dahlia wanted. This is what she was prepared for. This is where she thrives, is just talking out of her ass about things that never happened. And so she kind of finds her groove a little bit in this section. She stops crying. And so, you know, do you know anyone that would want to kill your husband? And she goes into this, like, she's like, well, he was on probation. And they're like, really? And she's like, yeah, he's been on probation. He stole all this money from all these people. He used to be a crack addict. he used to be an alcoholic, and she's just painting Mike. She has this huge story that she's obviously planned and practiced, that Mike stole all this money, which I think he did a little bit, you know. He stole all this money, and he's this crackhead, and that all these people that were like involved in this stock fraud scheme, like all of them have like gone away. She keeps saying like all the guys that he did this with have gone away, and he's a crack addict, and this stock fraud thing, he was trying to get off probation, but it's just been a nightmare since he's been trying to get off probation. He's been pulled, you know, he's being pulled over by the cops, which is just her. So she's like trying to portray to the cops that Mike is this career organized crime criminal crackhead, that he stole money from all these people, and all these people want him dead, and that, you know, he's just this horrible guy. And the cops are like, oh, all right. And she's really going for the, like, it kind of doesn't even really make sense. She just keeps saying, and the guys he did it with are going away, and the people that he did it to are really mad. And she's really, but she can feel the cops not really jiving with the story. They're kind of just like, oh yeah, really? That's good. But she's finding her groove. The officers still at this point are pretending like, oh, okay, going along, kind of half pretending. And the cop kind of seems bored. She's just rambling on about this like organized crime thing that she's got in her head. Like, hey, yeah, like all these people have gone away. And I listened to the story like 2 or 3 times being like, what is she even trying to say? And I don't even know. She's just like a lot of like, yeah, and then the guy he did it with went away, and then the cop kind of just lets her peter out, and then goes, okay, do you guys have a couple animals at the house, a couple dogs or something? And moves on. And Dahlia is like, can I keep telling you? Dahlia's really ready to tell this story about her organized crime fantasy. And so the cop kind of just cutting her off and like, all right, do you guys have dogs? She's like, well, I'm not done with my organized crime theory. And so the cop's like, oh yeah, keep going. Which is funny because in a normal interrogation where they believed Dahlia, they would let her keep talking. They would want her to talk for, you know, they would sit there and they would listen. And so it kind of throws Dahlia off. It's like, this is the information that you guys need, is the information that points away from me. So I'm telling you the information. And they're like, you got a dog or something? And so she's like, I just want to tell you everything, and just so you know this whole thing. And they're like, oh yeah, go ahead. And she's like, okay, so, you know, he's a crackhead, and it's organized crime. He stole all this money, and the people hate him, and they're like, oh, cool, good story, thanks. And then they tell her in fantasy land what happened to Mike. So they're like, yeah, so he must have, you know, stayed home. And she's like, yeah, we usually go to the gym because he's a crackhead and he needs a schedule. But he had liposuction and he had to stay home, and so I went to the gym. So they're like, okay, well, he must have come home and answered the door to somebody, and then they shot him twice, and he was up in the bedroom. And then Dahlia's like, well, we have cameras, and he should have been able to check who was at the door, so why would he answer the door? And I got to give it to Dahlia. She does have a pretty solid lie technique or lie strategy. if I had just been watching the interrogation without knowing the backstory, when she started being like, well, why would he even answer the door? We have cameras. It doesn't make sense to me. I got to give it to her. She seems pretty, I don't know about innocent, but she does seem to not be as guilty as some of the other people look in these interrogations. Because she's like, why would he answer the door? You can check. And the cop's just like, I don't know, Dahlia. Maybe he didn't answer the door. Maybe he's in the other room. You psycho. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. And then they're just like, all right, so now we're 11 minutes into this 30-minute interrogation. And they kind of are like, all right, well, we'll be right back. They pick up their papers and they leave the room. For the first time, they leave her in there. And so she, smartly, because you can't really sit there and look innocent, she puts her head down and she goes back in, so you can't see her face, and then she starts her fake crying, like, but again, it's easy in theory to fake cry for, 30 seconds, a minute, but try doing it for 4 minutes. It just gets insane and hard to do. And so she'll go and cry for a little bit and then just kind of stop and just sort of sit there and just be like, all right, well, this is taking a little bit longer than I thought. Well, at 13 minutes in, the cops come back in the room, and I think for the first time in Dahlia's life, fantasy land is over. All these kind of just liars and just wormhole absurdity, just lied to everyone in their whole life. No one has ever probably really challenged her, because it's just like, oh God, Dahlia's just lying again. Until right now, she runs into this brick wall. So detective comes in, sits down, and says, all right, Dahlia, the game's over. We're not playing games anymore. And you can see Dahlia just be like, what? And he goes, we're not playing games anymore. You know this guy? And he opens up the interrogation door and he goes, hey, bring him in here. Bring him in here. And 2 cops bring in the big black dude that was the undercover, the guy, the hitman that she met with. So they bring him in and they say, he's pretending to be, the undercover cop is now pretending to be, still pretending to be a hitman, but like he was caught by the cops. So he walks in with his head down, with 2 cops pulling him in by the shoulder. And they're like, do you know this guy? And Dahlia's looking at him, and she had met with this guy, and the look on her face is just priceless. She's sitting there like, and they're like, do you know him? She's like, no, I've never seen him before in my life. And they're like, you've never seen him before in your life? And she's like, no, I've never seen him before. And they're like, all right, get him out of here. And the cops like pull him and still make him look like some, criminal. And they pull him out of the door, and the door closes, and the detective's just staring at Dahlia. And Dahlia is just like, and after a nice long pause, the detective goes, you're going to jail today for solicitation of murder. You're under arrest. That's an undercover police officer. We filmed everything you did. We recorded everything that you did. You're going to jail today for solicitation of first-degree murder. And Dahlia just goes, I didn't do anything. And then the detective goes, did you hear what I said? You're going to jail today for solicitation of first-degree murder. And she goes, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And he just keeps going, first-degree murder, and I just picture his mouth like slowing down, like in the movies, like murder. And she's just sitting there like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And it almost, from watching all these, true crime cases over the years, that phrase, I didn't do anything, once that's all they're saying, that the person is just done. It's like, it's the people that are so caught and it's on film and it's almost like it whittles every other phrase out of the vocabulary until there's just, it's like it brings her down to almost being a child, where it's just like, I didn't do anything. That's the only thing she could say is, she just kept saying it. I didn't do anything. You know who else would say it? Is that San Francisco cancer doctor that was busted on To Catch a Predator, where he goes back to, hook up with the 12-year-old girl or whatever. And she's like, pour yourself a drink. I'm going to slip into my bikini. And he, like a moron, he dumps like half the margarita pitcher into the glass. And he's like, oh, good. And he's like and he goes to get a towel to clean up all the margarita that he just dumped to get drunk to hook up with the 12-year-old. Excuse me. And he sees the To Catch a Predator like cameraman, and he tries to leave and they arrest him in the garage. And same thing, he's just on camera. He's there to hook up with a 12-year-old. He was pouring a margarita and there's nothing else to say. What can you say? You're just caught, bro. And he's just going, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And that's where Dahlia is. Excuse me. And so the detective just lays down the law. You're going to jail today. We recorded everything. We took pictures of everything. You met with this guy. And she said, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And the phrase, the more you say it and think about it, it doesn't make any sense. What do you mean you didn't do anything? You had to have do something. You're sitting here. But yeah, if you didn't watch the real footage, go watch the detective lay down the law. It's really satisfying to see someone like Dahlia just stare with these big eyes for the first time in her life, while this detective is like, no more games. You're going to jail today. So, and Dahlia's sitting there, I didn't do anything. And then the detective's like, your husband's alive and well. And she's like, I want to see him. And then the detective's like, well, he doesn't want to see you because remember, you hired our guy to kill him. And she's like, and then, so the cops are pretending at this point like they don't need a confession. So they're standing up and they're saying, Dahlia, we recorded everything. You said that you were 5,000% sure that you wanted him dead. You remember that? Am I making that up? So what are we going to do, Dahlia? Just tell us. And she's sitting there, I haven't done anything. And the cop really just wants to nip this whole thing in the bud and get a confession. And so they're pretending like they don't need one. Like, you're going to jail for life. We recorded everything you say. So what do you want to do? Do you want to talk to me? Do you want to give me your side? Or is that it? Or are you just going to sit there and say you didn't do anything? Because he's saying things like, when I leave the room, it's over. The next time that we're going to see you is in trial, and you're going to do life in prison, he said. And she's in there, but I didn't do anything. And just, I didn't do anything. And it shows you that how important the confession is, because and you'll see that when this goes to trial, all hell breaks loose. Dahlia drags this thing completely down the wormhole of absurdity. And so they were right in trying to get a confession. Even though they had all this, it's like, well, who cares about the confession? Tell her she's going to jail forever and leave the room. Well, two or three trials later, they really needed the confession. But that's going too far into the future. So they're, saying like, you said 5,000% sure. Am I making that up? And she's like, oh, I didn't do anything. And then husband doesn't want to see you. All right. And so just to like up the ante and scare her into talking, they open the door and the detective's like, can someone come in here and cuff her? And so these detectives come in there, stand up, and she's still just like, I want to see my husband. And they put cuffs on her and sit her back down. And well, they keep the door open. And she is sitting there pathetically with the door open, looking out. And she has this, in this like little pathetic voice, she just goes, I don't know what's going on, please. And I love that phrase. We got to add that phrase to our list of phrases to use just when you need to get out of something. It's like, I don't know what's going on, please. You're just sitting there. Someone asks you to help them. You're like, I don't know what's going on, please. So she's got this little pathetic voice like, I don't know what's going on, please. And then through the door, just as if this was a movie. This case is insane because almost like the Chris Watts, there's so much of it on film and on recording. And so she sees Mike, the guy that she hired someone to have killed, through the door. And so she's like, Mike, come in here, come in here, come in here. And Mike's like, no, I don't want to come talk to you. Come in here, Mike. I don't know what's going on, please. And Dahlia just can't believe that her world is crashing down. She thought that she had it. She was hiring the hitman, being like, I might look like a little cute girl, but I'm not, okay? I'm 5,000% sure I want this done. And now she's sitting there cuffed going, I don't know what's going on, please. And she sees Mike. And, okay, so that's where we're going to stop. Because then the detectives that had been talking to her, I think they set her down probably a little bit in there by herself for a while. And then I think good cops or different cops kind of come in, try to slow things down. They take the cuffs off of her. And they, try to get a confession. And so that's where I'll start tomorrow. And then after that, we'll finish up the confession tomorrow. And then after that, she's arrested, and they bring her, they book her. And then from jail, she calls Mike to try to get help. And what an absurd phone call that is. You hire someone to kill your husband, and then you get caught for it, and then you get arrested for it. And then you call that husband from jail and ask help to get a lawyer. And it's just a great phone call, because Mike is like, Dahlia, I heard the recording. And she's like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And he's like, Dahlia, I heard you. I saw. And she's like, I heard what you heard, and I saw what you saw, and I didn't do anything. And Mike's like, even if that was true, you're being charged. Well, how can I help you? And he's like, if you sign back my house, I'll get you. I don't want to get too far into it, but it's great. I'll link it in the comments, but it's Dahlia's jailhouse conversation with Mike or whatever. She's like, everyone's being mean to me. It's classic, but that's where I'm going to cut this one off. Thank you to everybody that likes and subscribes and participates so much. Also, if you would like to support this channel on Patreon, I got a link in the description. And to everyone that has signed up already, I can't thank you enough. It really does help me. But hope you have a great day. True Crime Loser out. Why, Stive, and why?